Tracy Edmonds reached for the coffee cup sitting on the mahogany desk, her silver cufflinks catching the morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Thompson Industries' executive suite. Her fingers were inches from the cup when a mop clattered to the floor in the hallway. Heavy footsteps rushed toward the office. Then came the shout that would unravel everything. "Don't drink that coffee." Before we continue, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The janitor burst through the door, his worn work boots squeaking against the polished marble. Jackson Blandford, a man who usually disappeared into the background like furniture, stood there, breathing hard, his cleaning cart abandoned in the corridor, his eyes locked onto that coffee cup with a terror that made the room go cold. Tracy froze, her hand suspended in midair. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. The CEO of a billion-dollar pharmaceutical company and a single father who mopped floors at night stared at each other across a distance that measured far more than the 15 feet of expensive carpet between them. What happened next would expose a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of corporate power, destroy reputations built over decades, and prove that sometimes the people we never notice are the ones who see everything. This wasn't just about coffee. It never was. Jackson Blandford had worked at Thompson Industries for 6 years, and most employees couldn't have picked him out of a lineup. He clocked in at 10 p.m. when the executives went home, worked through the night while the building slept, and left before dawn broke over the city. His daughter Marnie was 8 years old, and he hadn't missed a single parent-teacher conference despite working nights. The math was brutal but simple. Night shift paid 30% more, and Marnie needed braces, better shoes, and a life that didn't taste like hand-me-downs and worry. The building knew him in pieces. The security guard at the front desk waved him through without looking up. The vending machine on the 3rd floor took his crumpled dollars at 2 a.m. when hunger made his hands shake. The executive bathroom on the 20th floor held his reflection in mirrors he cleaned until they sparkled, though he never quite recognized the tired man staring back. He was invisible by design, a ghost who left behind only the smell of cleaning solution and floors so clean they reflected the fluorescent lights like still water. But invisible people see things that visible people miss. Jackson saw the pattern first in the trash cans, small details that nobody else noticed because nobody else was looking. Coffee cups in Tracy Edmonds' office, always the same brand, always delivered at exactly 7:15 a.m. by a courier service that seemed too expensive for simple coffee. The cups had a logo he'd seen before, printed in gold foil that caught the light. Flair Wellness Solutions. The name made something in his memory itch like a mosquito bite he couldn't quite reach. Jackson wasn't the type to snoop. He had too much respect for privacy and too little time for other people's business. But 3 months ago, something changed. He found the first pill bottle while emptying the bathroom trash. Small, unmarked, the kind that held prescription medication but without any labels or instructions. Just white pills, dozens of them, scattered across crumpled paper towels like someone had tried to hide them in a hurry. He'd thought nothing of it at first. Executives got stressed, took vitamins, dealt with their problems in private. None of his concern. Then he found the second bottle, and a third. Always in Tracy Edmonds' private bathroom, always hidden under other trash, like secrets buried in shallow graves. The pills looked identical, perfectly round, and white as chalk. Jackson had stood there with a trash bag in his hand, staring at those pills, feeling the weight of something wrong pressing against his chest like a hand. His daughter took medication, asthma medication, that cost more than his weekly paycheck, dispensed in bottles covered with warnings and instructions and phone numbers to call if something went wrong. These pills had nothing. No warnings, no instructions, no phone numbers. Just silence wrapped in white plastic. Jackson started paying attention after that, not because he wanted to, but because something in his gut wouldn't let him stop. The human brain is strange like that. It recognizes patterns even when consciousness hasn't caught up yet, sees connections in the dark, like shapes moving behind a curtain. He noticed Tracy Edmonds looked tired lately, not the regular tired of long hours and too many meetings, but a deeper tired that lived in his bones. The CEO had always been sharp, quick with decisions, the kind of leader who remembered names and asked about families. But over the past few months, something had dimmed. Her hands shook sometimes when she signed documents. Her eyes went unfocused during conversations, like her mind was walking through rooms nobody else could see. Other executives showed the same signs. Sarah from the legal department had called in sick 4 times in 2 months. Robert Martinez in research and development had snapped at his assistant over nothing, then apologized with tears in his eyes. The chief financial officer had resigned suddenly, citing family reasons that nobody quite believed. The building hummed with whispered conversations that stopped when Jackson pushed his cleaning cart past open doors. He told himself it wasn't his business. He was a janitor, not a detective. His job was to clean floors and empty trash and go home to his daughter before she woke up for school. But the pills kept appearing, and his conscience kept poking him like a stick against a bruise. Marnie had looked at him one morning over breakfast, her small face serious in the way that kids get when they understand more than adults think they do, and asked why he looked worried all the time now. He'd told her nothing was wrong, but the lie tasted sour in his mouth. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday night in March. Jackson was cleaning the executive conference room, running his mop across floors that still smelled like expensive cologne and stress, when he noticed papers left behind on the table. Normally, he didn't read documents. Confidentiality was part of his job, an unspoken rule that kept people like him employed and trustworthy. But these papers had spilled across the floor, knocked over by someone in a hurry, and when he bent to pick them up, his eyes caught on a familiar name: Flair Wellness Solutions. The documents were technical, filled with medical terminology that swam across the pages like fish in murky water. But certain phrases jumped out at him, clear as daylight breaking through clouds. Accelerated Cognitive Enhancement Protocol. Minimal Side Effects in Controlled Trials. Executive Performance Optimization Program. And there, in smaller print at the bottom of one page, confidential beta testing phase, participant consent waivers on file. Jackson's hands went cold. He'd heard about these programs before, read articles online during his breaks about companies experimenting with cognitive enhancement drugs. Smart pills, some people called them. Medication designed to boost focus, improve memory, sharpen decision-making. The kind of thing that sounded like science fiction until you realized science fiction had stopped being fiction years ago. But the documents mentioned side effects too, buried in paragraphs of legal language that tried to make danger sound acceptable. Mood instability, memory disruption, physical dependence, potential long-term neurological impact still under investigation. And this phrase, which made his stomach drop: discontinuation should be medically supervised due to severe withdrawal complications. He photographed the documents with his phone, hands shaking so badly the first 3 pictures came out blurred. He wasn't sure why he did it. Insurance, maybe? Evidence of something that felt increasingly like a crime, though he couldn't name exactly what law was being broken. People took medication all the time. Companies offered wellness programs, but something about this felt wrong in a way that went deeper than rules or regulations. The coffee connection clicked into place that same night. He was cleaning Tracy Edmonds' office, emptying the trash, when he saw the Flair Wellness Solutions logo on a discarded coffee sleeve. The same logo from the documents, the same company. He pulled out his phone and searched for Flair Wellness Solutions online, but their website was sparse, professional, revealing nothing. A contact form, a mission statement about optimizing human potential, stock photos of smiling people in lab coats. No information about their products, their testing protocols, their client list. But when he dug deeper, searching through business registries and corporate filings, He found the connection that made everything snap into focus. Flair Wellness Solutions was a subsidiary of Thompson Industries, the same company that employed him, the same company whose executives were taking unmarked pills. They were testing their own product on themselves, or someone was testing it on them, and nobody was talking about it openly because nobody wanted the questions that would follow. Jackson Blandford wasn't a hero in the traditional sense. He was a man who paid his rent on time, kissed his daughter goodnight, and tried to live a life that didn't hurt anyone. But standing in that empty office at 2 a.m. with evidence of something wrong burning in his pocket, he faced the choice that defines character more than any dramatic moment ever could. He could pretend he'd seen nothing. He could put the documents back, delete the photos, and let other people handle their own problems. It would be easy. Safe. Smart, even. But Marnie's face kept appearing in his mind, her trust in him, absolute and unquestioning. The way she believed her father could fix anything, would always do the right thing. What kind of man did he want her to see when she looked at him? What kind of example was he setting about standing up when standing up was hard? He spent the next 2 weeks researching everything he could find about cognitive enhancement drugs and corporate testing programs. The internet yielded fragments of information, puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit together, but suggested a picture nonetheless. Several pharmaceutical companies had gotten in trouble for unauthorized human testing. Executives at tech companies had been quietly using smart pills for years, though nobody talked about it publicly. The line between voluntary participation and corporate pressure was thinner than anyone wanted to admit. Jackson also watched Tracy Edmonds more carefully now, though he tried to be subtle about it. The CEO came in early most mornings, always looking slightly off balance, like a woman walking on a ship in rough seas. She held onto furniture when she crossed rooms. Her assistant had started screening his calls more aggressively, and every morning at 7:15 a.m., that coffee arrived from Flair Wellness Solutions, delivered by a courier who never stayed long enough to chat. The coffee itself became Jackson's focus. He started checking the executive floor around 7 a.m., timing his cleaning schedule to coincide with delivery. He never touched the cups, but he watched them. Watched how Tracy reached for them automatically, drank deeply like a woman dying of thirst. Watched how her hand steadied after a few minutes, how her eyes cleared, how she became herself again. It looked like relief, but Jackson recognized it now for what it really was. Dependence. The final piece fell into place on a Friday morning when Jackson arrived at work to find the building in chaos. Ambulances outside, security guards blocking the elevators, employees clustered in worried groups. Robert Martinez from Research and Development had collapsed in his office. Seizure, someone said. Heart attack, someone else whispered. Jackson stood in the lobby with his cleaning cart, invisible as always, and listened to the fragments of conversation floating around him like ash. He'd been acting strange lately. Couldn't remember the simplest things yesterday. Do you think it was stress? I heard he was part of some wellness program. The last comment came from a young woman in accounting, and she said it quietly, like she wasn't sure she should be saying it at all. Nobody responded. The conversation moved on. But Jackson heard it, and he knew that Robert Martinez had been taking those same white pills, knew that whatever was in that coffee and those unmarked bottles wasn't helping anyone. It was hurting them. He made his decision that night after his shift ended. He drove home as dawn painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, parked outside his apartment, and sat in the car for 20 minutes, trying to convince himself he was doing the right thing. Then he went inside, kissed his sleeping daughter on the forehead, and sent an anonymous email to Tracy Edmonds' personal address. No threats, no demands. Just 3 photographs of the documents he'd found, and 1 sentence. You're being poisoned. The coffee, the pills, all of it. Check what you're really taking. He pressed send before he could change his mind. Monday morning arrived with Tracy Edmonds reaching for her coffee, and Jackson Blandford running down a hallway shouting at her to stop. The CEO's hand froze inches from the cup, and Jackson burst through the door like a man possessed. His chest heaved from running up 20 flights of stairs because the elevator was too slow, and he couldn't wait. Couldn't risk being even 30 seconds late. "Don't drink that coffee," Jackson gasped, doubled over with his hands on his knees. "Please, don't drink it." Tracy stared at him, and Jackson watched recognition flicker across the CEO's face. The anonymous email, the photographs, the warning that had kept Tracy awake all weekend, turning pieces over in her mind like shards of broken glass. The coffee sat between them on the desk, steam still rising, innocent and deadly. "Who are you?" Tracy asked, though her tone suggested she was asking something deeper. "Not your name, but your reason, your proof, your certainty." "I'm the janitor," Jackson said, straightening up. "I'm the person who empties your trash. I'm nobody important. But I've been watching, and I've been worried. And I sent you that email because I think someone is hurting you and everyone else on this floor." The words tumbled out in a rush, unpracticed and raw. Jackson explained about the pills, the documents, the pattern of illness spreading through the executive level. He explained about Flair Wellness Solutions being a Thompson subsidiary. He explained about Robert Martinez collapsing, about the side effects buried in technical language, about cognitive enhancement that looked more like slow poisoning. Tracy listened without interrupting, her face going pale, then gray, then something harder to read. When Jackson finished talking, the office went quiet except for the hum of the ventilation system and the distant sound of traffic 20 floors below. Tracy looked at the coffee cup like it had personally betrayed her. Then she picked it up, walked to the window, and looked at it closely for the first time in months. "I never questioned it," Tracy said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They told me it was a new wellness program. Optimized nutrition, cognitive support, perfectly safe. I felt amazing at first. Sharper, faster, better than I'd felt in years. So did everyone else who participated. We were crushing our targets, making decisions in hours that used to take weeks. It felt like finally becoming the leaders we were supposed to be." She set the coffee down on the windowsill, away from her desk, away from temptation. "But then things started changing. I couldn't sleep without taking something to calm down. Couldn't focus without the morning dose. Started forgetting conversations I'd had the day before. My daughter asked me last week why I seemed so angry all the time, and I couldn't even remember being angry. It was like watching myself from outside my own body." Jackson listened, and something in his chest loosened. He'd been right to say something. Right to risk his job, his safety, his invisibility. The CEO of Thompson Industries stood in front of him, vulnerable and scared, and finally seeing the truth that had been sitting on her desk every morning. "Who knew about this?" Jackson asked. "Who set up the program?" Tracy's face hardened. "Our chief medical officer, Dr. Sonia Adkins. She presented it as an executive health initiative 6 months ago. Voluntary, she said. Revolutionary, she said. I trusted her. Trust. That fragile thing that breaks so easily and cuts so deep when the pieces scatter." What happened next moved fast, like dominoes falling in a line too perfect to be accidental. Tracy called an emergency board meeting. She brought Jackson with him, much to the janitor's protest. Because sometimes the person who sees the truth needs to be in the room when the truth gets told. The boardroom filled with confused executives, all of them clutching coffee cups from Flair Wellness Solutions, all of them showing the same signs of dependence Jackson had noticed in Tracy. Dr. Sonia Adkins sat at the far end of the table, composed and professional in her white coat, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked like competence personified, like someone who had spent a lifetime earning trust and respect. When Tracy explained why she'd called the meeting, her expression didn't change at all. "I'd like Dr. Adkins to explain exactly what's in the cognitive enhancement program," Tracy said, her voice steady despite the shaking in his hands. "Full disclosure, no medical terminology, no corporate language. Just the truth. Dr. Adkins smiled, and it was the smile of someone who'd been waiting for this moment, maybe even hoping for it. She opened a leather folder in front of her and pulled out documents that looked disturbingly similar to the ones Jackson had photographed weeks ago. The Flair Wellness Solutions program, she began, was designed to test a new generation of cognitive enhancement medication on a controlled population. You. The room erupted. Executives shouted over each other, their coffee cups forgotten, their faces flushing with anger and betrayal. Dr. Adkins waited for the noise to die down, still smiling that terrible smile. You all signed consent forms, she continued. You all agreed to participate in experimental treatment. You all wanted the competitive edge, the sharper thinking, the better performance metrics. I simply gave you what you asked for. We didn't know it was experimental, Sarah from legal snarled. You called it a wellness program. You said it was safe. I said it was groundbreaking, Dr. Adkins corrected. And it is. The data we've collected from monitoring all of you has been invaluable. Thompson Industries will make billions once we bring this product to market. You should be thanking me for including you in the ground floor of something revolutionary. The room went cold. Jackson, standing against the wall where invisible people belonged, finally understood the full scope of what he'd uncovered. This wasn't just corporate negligence or a wellness program gone wrong. This was deliberate human experimentation, dressed up in the language of innovation and success. Dr. Adkins had turned her own colleagues into test subjects, monitoring their decline, collecting data on their side effects, all in service of a product launch that would make the company rich. The side effects, Tracy said, her voice dangerous now. Robert Martinez had a seizure. People are losing their memories. What have you done to us? Dr. Adkins's smile finally faded. Side effects are part of any testing process. Most of you will recover fully once we adjust the dosage. A few might experience longer-term complications, but that's why we test. To learn, to improve. You're pioneers. We're victims, Jackson said, and everyone turned to look at him. He'd spoken without thinking, his anger overriding his usual caution. You poisoned them. You lied to them. You made them dependent on something they didn't even know was hurting them, and you called it medicine. Dr. D. Adkins looked at Jackson like she was seeing him for the first time, and her expression held something close to contempt. And who are you exactly? The janitor who reads trash? I'm the person who noticed when nobody else did, Jackson shot back. I'm the person who cared enough to say something, even though saying something could cost me everything. What's your excuse? The silence that followed was absolute. Tracy stood up slowly, gathering herself with visible effort. Dr. Adkins, you're fired. Effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building. And then I'm calling our lawyers, the medical board, and every regulatory agency that will listen. What you've done here is criminal. Dr. Adkins gathered her folder with movements that remained calm and precise. You'll never prove it. The consent forms are legally binding. I followed every protocol, and when Thompson Industries stock drops because of this scandal, you'll wish you'd just kept drinking the coffee and kept your mouth shut. She left the boardroom with her head high, and Jackson thought he'd never seen evil look quite so ordinary. She was just a woman in a white coat, brilliant and ambitious, and willing to destroy lives for data and profit. The banality of it made his skin crawl. The next few weeks were chaotic. Tracy Edmonds admitted herself to a hospital for supervised withdrawal from the cognitive enhancement medication. So did 9 other executives who'd participated in the program. The media descended on Thompson Industries like vultures, tearing apart the story with headlines that screamed about corporate experimentation and executive drug trials. Dr. Sonia Adkins was arrested, charged with multiple counts of medical fraud and unauthorized human experimentation. Her lawyers were expensive, but the evidence was overwhelming. Jackson Blandford became briefly famous, though he hated every second of it. Reporters camped outside his apartment. Co-workers who'd never spoken to him suddenly wanted to hear his story. The building that had kept him invisible now couldn't stop looking at him. He gave one interview to a local news station, spoke for 5 minutes about noticing things and doing the right thing even when it was hard, and then refused all other requests. Fame wasn't what he wanted. He just wanted his daughter safe and his conscience clear. Tracy Edmonds recovered slowly. The withdrawal was brutal, like crawling out of a hole her brain had dug for her. But with medical supervision and time, her mind cleared. Her hand stopped shaking. Her memory knit itself back together, though some pieces remained lost, like socks in a dryer. She returned to Thompson Industries 3 months later, thinner and quieter, but fundamentally changed. Her first act as CEO was to shut down Flair Wellness Solutions permanently. Her second was to implement new ethics oversight for all company research programs. Her third was to find Jackson Blandford and offer him a job in corporate compliance with a salary that would change his life and his daughter's future. Jackson almost said no. He liked cleaning, liked the quiet hours, and liked being invisible. But Marnie needed braces and better schools and opportunities he couldn't give her on a janitor's wage. So he said yes, stepped into visibility, and discovered that being seen wasn't as terrifying as he'd thought. The cognitive enhancement medication never made it to market. The FDA opened an investigation that revealed years of cut corners and manipulated data. Other pharmaceutical companies quietly shelved their own similar programs, afraid of becoming the next scandal. Dr. Sonia Adkins went to prison for 6 years, though many people thought it should have been longer. She maintained her innocence throughout the trial, insisting she'd been pushing the boundaries of science for humanity's benefit. The jury disagreed. Robert Martinez recovered from his seizure, but retired early. The damage to his nervous system was permanent, and Thompson Industries settled his lawsuit for an undisclosed amount that everyone assumed included more zeros than most people would see in a lifetime. Other executives left the company too, unable to trust an organization that had let them be experimented on in the name of performance and profit. The story of Thompson Industries became a case study in business ethics classes, a cautionary tale about what happens when the pursuit of excellence becomes the pursuit of enhancement at any cost. But Jackson thought the real lesson was simpler and harder to swallow. People in power are just people, vulnerable and flawed, and desperate for advantages that keep them ahead of competition they can't see but always feel breathing down their necks. They made a choice to drink that coffee every morning, to take those pills, to trust someone who wore authority like armor. And because they were powerful, because they were successful, because they were surrounded by people who told them they were special, they never questioned whether special treatment might actually be dangerous treatment. Jackson still worked nights sometimes, going back to his old cleaning roots, when the new compliance job felt too heavy with meetings and documents and decisions. He'd push his cart through empty hallways, mop floors that reflected fluorescent lights, and remember the night he'd found those pills in the trash. One small choice, made in a moment when it would have been easier to look away, had changed everything. Not just for him, but for people whose names he barely knew and lives he'd touched without meaning to. Marnie got her braces. She also got a college fund, better clothes, and a father who came home for dinner instead of breakfast. She asked him once if he was a hero, and Jackson laughed and told her the truth. Heroes were people who did extraordinary things in extraordinary circumstances. He was just someone who'd noticed something wrong and spoken up about it. The real heroism was in noticing, in caring, in choosing to act, when acting was inconvenient and dangerous and might cost him everything. Tracy Edmonds kept a photograph on her desk now, though nobody except her closest confidants knew why. It showed a coffee cup, steam rising from dark liquid, sitting on a mahogany desk in morning light. She looked at it sometimes when decisions felt heavy and shortcuts felt tempting. The photograph reminded her how close she'd come to losing herself to a promise of being better, faster, sharper. how easy it had been to drink the poison because someone called it medicine. The pharmaceutical industry changed too, slowly and reluctantly. The way powerful systems always change when forced to look at their reflections and acknowledge the damage they've done. New regulations passed, though critics said they didn't go far enough. Oversight committees formed, though skeptics wondered who would watch the watchers. The conversation about cognitive enhancement continued in academic journals and ethics boards and late-night talk shows, because the desire to be better, smarter, more capable hadn't disappeared just because one company's program had imploded spectacularly. But in a small apartment across the city, a janitor-turned-compliance officer helped his daughter with her homework and felt at peace with the choice he'd made. Not because it had turned out well, though it had. Not because people called him brave, though some did. But because when the moment had arrived to look away or speak up, to protect himself or protect others, he'd chosen the harder path. And that choice had revealed something fundamental about who he was and who he wanted to be. The story might have ended there, with justice served and lessons learned, and lives rebuilt from the rubble of broken trust. But there was one more piece, one final revelation that came 6 months after Dr. Sonia Adkins went to prison. A whistleblower from inside Flair Wellness Solutions came forward, with documents that had somehow survived the company's shutdown. These documents told a different story than the one Dr. Adkins had told in court. They showed that she hadn't been a rogue scientist conducting unauthorized experiments. She'd had approval, signatures from board members, email chains that proved Thompson Industries' leadership had known exactly what was happening. Not Tracy Edmonds, who'd genuinely been kept in the dark, but the people above her. The board members who demanded better performance, higher profits, competitive advantages at any cost. The revelation reopened investigations and destroyed what was left of Thompson Industries' reputation. The company that had survived the scandal now faced complete collapse. Stock prices plummeted, lawsuits multiplied, and Tracy Edmonds, who'd thought she was leading the recovery, discovered she'd been working for people who saw her as just another test subject, another data point in an experiment that treated human beings like lab rats. She resigned the day after the whistleblower's documents became public. Couldn't stomach working for an organization built on lies and cruelty. Couldn't pretend the rot was limited to one doctor when it clearly went deeper than anyone had wanted to admit. The company filed for bankruptcy 3 months later, broken by its own ambition. Jackson watched it all happen from the outside now, no longer part of Thompson's story. He'd moved to a different company, one that valued ethics over innovation, where compliance meant something more than checking boxes to avoid lawsuits. He still thought about that morning sometimes, running up 20 flights of stairs to stop Tracy Edmonds from drinking poisoned coffee. How such a small action had unraveled such a large conspiracy. How being invisible had given him the vision to see what everyone else missed. Marnie asked him once what he'd learned from everything that happened. He'd thought about it for a long time before answering, wanting to get it right. I learned that the people nobody notices are sometimes the ones who notice everything, he'd said. I learned that doing the right thing doesn't always fix everything, but not doing the right thing guarantees nothing gets fixed. And I learned that coffee should just be coffee, not a delivery system for experiments nobody consented to. She'd laughed at that last part, but her eyes had been serious. She understood what he was really saying. That vigilance matters, that speaking up matters, that the small choices we make in private moments define us more than the big public gestures ever could. The coffee cup that Tracy Edmonds kept on her desk eventually moved to a storage box, then to a landfill, just another piece of trash in a world full of discarded things. But the memory of it remained, sharp and clear, a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous threats come disguised as gifts, that success and improvement and optimization are just words until you understand what they cost and who pays the price. That the difference between medicine and poison is often just a matter of honesty about what you're really swallowing. And somewhere in a city full of invisible people doing invisible work, a former janitor went home to his daughter and felt grateful for the gift of noticing, the courage to speak, and the knowledge that he'd chosen correctly when the moment demanded a choice. The coffee had stayed on the desk, undrunk and deadly, and that made all the difference.